Good evening. It's a joy to be with you all. And it's a very good practical subject tonight, introspection. We have a collection of our Guru's talks, Journey to Self-Realization. And I think that's a wonderful title to have for one of our Guru's books, because it really describes the life that we embrace as devotees of God. And especially when we begin practicing the teachings on a daily basis, and each day using the science of Kriya Yoga to dive deep within as best we can, that's when the journey to self-realization begins in earnest. In our Guru's teachings, he describes very clearly the goal, the purpose of life. And maybe you remember when you first read Autobiography of a Yogi, that chapter in Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. We were so thrilled because it speaks to our souls. We realize that we too can have that divine experience, samadhi, cosmic consciousness, if we persevere with dedication. Guruji said that every devotee should memorize his poem Samadhi. It's in that chapter. And I remember years ago when I first memorized that poem, my heart and mind were just filled with these thoughts. Lifted every vapor of sorrow. Eternity and I, one united ray. And for days I was just in this wonderful state, filled with the expanding thoughts of the Guru. When we deeply absorb the teachings of the Guru, we reawaken to our highest potential. And then we have the meditation techniques, these powerful tools that we use each day to transform our consciousness. But the journey to self-realization, it's not an easy journey. It's not easy at all. It requires tremendous effort, tremendous devotion, and it requires tremendous self-watchfulness. Because there are these two great forces in creation. That force, that love of God, that is pulling us to spirit, that urges us, coaxes us, propels us to do that which is good and noble in life, to realize our fullest potential. But then there's that other force, Maya, delusion, that's always trying to pull us down. And to reach God, to experience His great love and peace and joy, we have to constantly swim against the current of Maya, resisting that lower self and courageously striving to express the beauty of the soul. And that's not always easy. I remember when I was a young boy, my older brother and I, we shared a bedroom, and I slept underneath, and he slept on top. So one night, I'm asleep, and I hear this voice saying, "Billy, Billy," that was my name, "Billy, wake up." And I woke up, and I looked, and on the wall, there was a shadow like the head of a big goose. And it was my brother making the shadow with his hands and making a funny voice. Well, this was Good Goose. And Good Goose told me things like, be kind to your sisters, and obey your parents, do your homework, keep your room clean, always telling me to be good. And so we played along a while, and then I fell asleep again. And after a while, there was another voice saying, kid, wake up. And I woke up, and on the wall there was a shadow like a big frog. And this was Mr. Frog, the other guy. And he told me things like, don't obey your parents, they're stupid. And a messy room is fun. And for months, we were totally into this game where Good Goose and Mr. Frog were both vying to influence me. And Good Goose would tell me, you stay away from Mr. Frog, he's naughty. And Mr. Frog would tell me, Good Goose is a sissy, you come along with me, we'll have fun. And it was just this child's game that these two young boys were playing, yet within that game is the whole game of creation. Conquering that lower self so that we can free the higher self, so that the higher self becomes free to unite with God. And maybe you remember watching the cartoons when you were young, and this main character in the cartoon is at a dilemma, and he has some big decision to make. And on one shoulder is a little miniature of the character with the halos and the wings, the little angel. And on the other shoulder is a little miniature of the character with the two horns. And the little angel and the little devil are having this terrific fight, trying to influence the main guy. And the main character is totally bewildered. He doesn't know what to do. Sometimes it feels like that. We want so much, we're trying so sincerely to do the right thing, to tune in with the goodness of God, and yet in this creation of duality, it's easy to be bad, to give in to the lower nature. This basic conflict in this creation of duality is the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, India's sacred scripture. Reading from chapter 1, verse 1. Dhritarashtra said, "On the holy plain of Kurukshetra, when my offspring and the sons of Pandu had gathered together, eager for battle, what did they, O Sanjaya?" And our Guru explains that this battle of Kurukshetra is symbolic of that inner battle that takes place within us each day. Now, the blind king Dhritarashtra represents Manas, the blind, lower, sense-identified mind. In our normal consciousness, we're so dependent upon these very limited senses, and we are blind. What are we blind to? We're blind to our divine nature. We're blind to our eternal connection with the all-loving, all-blissful, all-powerful God. And a result of that blindness, the offspring of Dhritarashtra, the evil Kuru princes, which are the sense tendencies, the bad habits that pull us down. Anger, greed, selfishness, dishonesty, self-centeredness. These are some of the evil Kurus that we all have to contend with. Pandu is the wisdom of the soul, and the sons of Pandu are the virtues of the soul. Calmness, adherence to righteousness, self-control. Now, one very important character in this war of Kurukshetra is Sanjaya. At the beginning of the whole war, Sanjaya is given the spiritual power where from a distance he can behold everything taking place on the battlefield, so he can report to the blind King Dhritarashtra and keep him informed of what has taken place. Now, remembering Dhritarashtra is the blind, sense-identified mind. And one of the ways we are blind, we don't see ourselves as we truly are, because our bad habits have become second nature to us, you see. As the poet Robert Burns put it, "Oh, to see ourselves as others see us." So, as Dhritarashtra consults Sanjaya in the Bhagavad Gita, each day we have to consult our Sanjaya. And in his Gita commentary, our Guru explains, Sanjaya represents divine insight. Divine insight, the power of impartial, intuitive self-analysis. The power of introspection. Guruji says, it is the ability to stand aside, observe oneself without any prejudice, and judge accurately. And so each day, we consult our Sanjaya gathered together on the battlefield of my life, my consciousness. How did my good and bad tendencies do today? Who won the battle? Now, some ways to practice introspection. I remember when I first entered the ashram, We arrived in Antidotes, where the postulant ashram for the monks is, where the young monks begin their training. And I had no sooner arrived and dropped off my luggage in my room, I was asked to join the other monks. And they were all listening to a tape of a spiritual class by one of the brothers. And as the tape ended, I noticed that each one of them took out a little notebook. And the notebooks were all different, but they all had something. And I learned later that this was the time of daily introspection. Every monk had their own way of keeping track. Some would use colored pencils where each color would represent a different thing, or some would just make a check or a minus or a plus. Each one did it a little differently, but we all took time at the end of the day to analyze our actions, our desires, our thoughts, to see if during that day we had drawn closer to God or if we had been pulled by the ego. And as I left that room, I was handed what we call an introspection chart. It's basically a list of questions you ask yourself every day. I still use it after 30 years. It's changed, because as you change, your introspection chart needs to change to reflect those things you currently need to work on. But the basic categories really haven't changed in all these years. First, you review your spiritual routine. How long did I meditate? Did I meditate deeply with concentration? Did I practice the Hong Sa technique of concentration? Did I practice the Om technique? Did I do my Kriyas? After the techniques, am I sitting in the stillness, communing with God? Our gurus said, keep a diary of your spiritual life. I used to make a record of how long I had meditated daily and how deep I had gone. You also keep track of your attitude. In Dayamata's words, Guruji taught us to introspect every evening. How did I do today? Was my attitude right? Was I angry? Was I jealous? Was I mean? Was I quarrelsome? Was I dishonest? By this kind of inner inquiry, and by patient effort to improve, gradually you purify your consciousness of all the flaws that keep God at a distance. And then there's the section I call the key questions. Am I feeling deeper love for God? Am I practicing the presence of God? What bad habit is troubling me the most? When we come to the spiritual path, initially we're filled with a lot of enthusiasm because there's that contrast, you see, between the old worldly life that we're leaving behind and the new spiritual life that's opening up before us. With time, we develop the daily habit of meditation. But if we're not careful, meditation can become too habitual, where you realize you've just spent half an hour or an hour of meditation and you've been thinking of everything but God. You've been absent-minded, going through the motions. And every devotee, at times, has to face and overcome this struggle. So one very effective way I've found to pull yourself out of the spiritual lethargy is to ask yourself with deep yearning, with deep sincerity, the key questions. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? Am I feeling deeper love for God? Am I feeling greater attunement with the Guru? And self-analysis, it's not just something we do at the end of the day. We have to be aware throughout the day, too. It's kind of, in that sense, it's a little bit like driving. When you're driving, you just can't put your attention on the road once in a while. You soon get in big trouble. And so as we're going through the day, in the background of our mind, there has to be a constant awareness of where our actions, our thoughts, our desires are leading us, so that we never get too far off from our goal of seeking and loving and pleasing our beloved God. Guruji says, at certain times during the day, have a checkup on your physical, mental, and spiritual machines to see how they are behaving. Now, one pitfall. People introspect, and they see something bad in themselves, and then they stop and leave the introspection, and they feel twice as bad. When you see something about yourself you don't like, don't stop there. Then what we do is we look to the teachings. We look to the Guru's teachings to put together a strategy for overcoming that bad habit by cultivating the opposite good habit. And so you make it a project, you see. You look up some quotes from the master about that good habit you want to cultivate. Now, how do we form a good habit? By repeating good actions. And you repeat them, you cut a groove in the consciousness which forms that good habit you want. So you take some specific actions from our Guru's teachings and you put them on your introspection chart that you look at every evening. And now you have a battle plan for changing yourself, a battle plan that will help you to improve, that will help you to draw closer to God. So if we're fearful, we cultivate courage. If we're having trouble with others and feeling angry, we work on patience and understanding others. If we're struggling with restlessness, we cultivate inner peace. And no matter what the challenge we're facing, no matter what problem will ever come to you, you'll always find a solution in our Guru's teachings. You look at the lessons, the books, the magazine, all the audio, video material we have, every conceivable subject is covered there. Even-mindedness, methods of vitality and healing, overcoming worry and nervousness, the energization exercises, of course, methods of relaxation, how to meditate, seeking God, developing a personal relationship with God. Every conceivable subject we'll ever need to be successful in life is there. I think one struggle that we all go through at times, the moodiness. We get in that negative mood, and we don't like it, and those around us most certainly don't like it, and yet sometimes it's hard to know what to do. Well, the first step, when you have the mood, you have to analyze why, you see. You know, if you're in a sailboat and you're having a nice sail on the ocean, and suddenly that boat starts leaning badly to one side, you can't ignore that. You can't pretend that's not happening. You have to understand what's going on so you can correct. When there's a kink in our consciousness, when we're angry or fearful, anxious, and especially if that continues for a period of time, we have to understand what's going on. We have to analyze why. And it helps so much to bring God into it. Ask God and Guru to help you understand the struggle you're going through. There's a prayer from Master that I love so much. Lord, make my understanding the temple of thy guidance. And as we try to understand, and as we ask God, help me, Lord, help me to understand, there is that blessing there. God begins to speak to us through those quiet whispers of intuition. We begin to have a better understanding of what we're going through and the next step we need to take. We get our sense of direction. We get our bearings. Now, if we're being hit with lots of moods, one good question to ask yourself is, how am I living? Because lots of moods can mean we're going in the wrong direction. We're not living rightly. Moses gave the 10 Commandments. Now, our Guru didn't like that word commandment because no one likes to be commanded, to have to follow out of fear. So what Master called them, the 10 eternal rules of happiness. There are these cosmic laws, principles, and if you go against them, you suffer. You put your finger in the fire, it's going to burn. God doesn't want you to burn. He's saying don't do it. But it is we who punish ourselves. Guruji said, the breaking of the 10 Commandments is the primary source of all the misery in the world. Once a couple came to Master for counseling, and they had been married for about a year. and they were having lots of trouble, lots of fights. And very gently he said to them, try having a little less sex. In today's world, there's so much emphasis on living on the physical plane, but you look at the ones they put on the pedestal, the so-called sex symbols, and for most of them, their personal lives are in shambles. They are not happy, are content, and that's a clue. Living a life where it's just sex, sex, give me more sex, that does not give health. That does not make one complete and happy and peaceful. If we abuse sex, if we abuse any of the senses, the price is too steep to pay. We lose our health, we lose our happiness, no peace of mind. Now, this doesn't mean sex is bad. Don't misunderstand. We don't say sex is evil. Yoga looks at sex, at all the passions, in a very understanding and a very scientific way. There are these forces. As long as the soul is resident in the physical form, we have to understand and deal with these things. Yoga teaches us to live a life of moderation, of self-control, to conserve our energies so that we can maintain this body and mind in such a state of vitality where we're just brimming with enthusiasm and energy and youthfulness. Guruji says, self-control is not self-torture, but leads instead to soul happiness. Now, one way to break the mood, to prevent the moods, is to cultivate positive thinking. The saints of India teach that conditions in this world are neither positive or negative, but essentially neutral. But it is our thoughts and feelings about the circumstances in our life that make the world seem so terrible are so beautiful. And so Master said, change your thoughts if you wish to change your circumstances. Well, there was this man, a writer, and he lived in New York. And in New York, in the old buildings, much of the heating is done by the steam. And he had a steam radiator in his apartment that was always popping and sizzling and crackling. And he tried to work on his book, but it would really disturb him. It was a real nuisance. So one weekend, this fellow is out camping with his friends. And they build a nice campfire. And as he's watching and enjoying that campfire, suddenly it hits him because the wood in the fire is popping and sizzling and crackling. And he thinks to himself, this is crazy. I hate one and I'm enjoying the other. And so when he returned to his apartment in the city, whenever the radiator would act up, he'd tell himself, relax, it's just like the campfire. Enjoy it. And within 2 days, he forgot all about it. It never bothered him again. He changed his thoughts. The whole tone of the experience changed. Now, sometimes it's hard to control the thoughts directly. That's partially a definition of the mood. You get in this rut of negative thoughts, and it's hard to take control. If that's the case, there are certain actions you can take that will influence and uplift the pattern of your thoughts. And one of the greatest things you can do is just start doing something for someone else. Because part of the problem about the mood, we get in this rut of thinking about me, the little self, my problems, no one understands me, and we get in this cycle of obsessing about ourselves and our problems, and we have to pull ourselves out of that. Once the psychiatrist Carl Menninger was giving a lecture, and someone asked him, what advice would you give to someone who felt a nervous breakdown coming on? And he said, lock up your house, go across the railway tracks, find someone in need, and do something to help. And our guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, says, try to make others happy. As you forget self in service to others, you will find that without seeking it, your own cup of happiness will be full. And it doesn't have to be something big you have to do, you know. To break a mood, you don't have to run to India or Africa and become a missionary. Every day, there's little opportunities to forget the little self and find happiness and joy in the higher path, living and doing for others. I remember when I first came into the ashram, that first year was pretty rough for me. And for whatever karmic reasons, my struggle that first year, restlessness. I tried, I was very sincere, but I was just so restless. And especially Sundays was our day of silence, still is in the ashram. And I try to have my long meditation, but my mind was just all over the place that first year. And then I didn't know what to do with myself, because the whole day you spend in silence. And then those negative thoughts would come, and they would come, you're not happy, maybe you don't belong here, but I never accepted that. I threw it out. And the way I broke that, I would just start walking, briskly walking around the ashram grounds. And I'd see these little bits of paper and trash that the wind had blown in. And so I'd pick them up. But I'd pick them up for Master. And each time I'd say a little prayer. I'd just say, Master, maybe I'm not the best meditator right now, and maybe I'm restless, but this much I will do for you. I can pick up this piece of trash. Help me. Sometimes I'd do that for an hour, sometimes longer. And it would always work. The strength, the peace would start to come, and that intuitive conviction would begin to speak to me. My child, don't be discouraged. You keep on. You keep on, and the peace and happiness you will find in this life will be beyond your wildest imaginations. And that's exactly what happened with time. And with time, my meditations improved. So the next time you don't feel so good, try it out. Start doing something for someone else. Do something for God and Guru. And if you don't feel like it, force yourself to. And you will see that mood, it will break. Another good way to break the mood is creative thinking and creative activity. Guruji very much encouraged this. He said, creative thinking is the best antidote for moods. Moods get their grip on your consciousness when you are in a negative or passive state of mind. Therefore, develop creative thinking. When you are not active physically, do something creative in your mind. Keep it so busy that you have no time to indulge in moodiness. So what you do, you make a list of things you can do when you feel the mood coming on. Mood busters. Come up with maybe 7 or 8 good things to do. Creative projects, to engage and keep the mind and body busy in constructive activity, doing things for someone else. And when you're not feeling the best, when you're starting to feel blue, just take out that list and choose something and do it. Don't be passive, because that's when the moods get their grip on your consciousness, you see. You have to use your willpower and conquer that mood. Now, having said all that, sometimes you're living rightly, you're meditating, have a good spiritual routine, you're doing everything that the Guru asks of you, and yet you're struggling. And that thought comes, here I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, why am I so unhappy? Why am I so unhappy? Guruji says, our moods are ink marks traced on the graph of life by the karma of the past. So there will be times when you're doing everything you are supposed to be doing, but still the mood comes. When this type of mood hits you, this is a mood from your past karma. Bad habits of the past that now manifest, express as moods. So how do you overcome this type of mood, the karmic mood? You overcome this type of mood by engaging in karma-destroying actions. What type of actions destroy karma? Meditation, especially Kriya Yoga. Guruji says, each and every time we practice Kriya, we're burning up, cauterizing the seeds of that past bad karma. Greatest way to overcome karma, Kriya Yoga. And sure, if you have deep depression, and that continues for a time, by all means, get professional help, but bring God into it. Ask Him to guide you to the person who's right for you, who can be His channel. And keep making that spiritual effort. Keep spending at least a little time communing with God in meditation, and keep living a life filled with devotion. Guruji says if we love God with all our hearts, He wipes out our karma. And no matter how long you struggle, never think the deck is stacked against you. Don't let that discourage you, the struggles. We all have them, but you mustn't let that discourage. We have to realize every condition, every test and struggle of body and mind, that's temporary. You do your best, you meditate, you ask God to guide you. Lord, bless me, I love you, help me. And then, as the Guru used to say, keep on keeping on. Keep practicing the teachings. And never be discouraged. You know, when you're in a tunnel, driving in the tunnel, it's very dark. But you aren't filled with despair. Oh, my life is going to be filled with darkness forever. No, because you know you just keep driving and that car will move toward the end of the tunnel and you'll go out into the light. But sometimes when we're in the tunnel of our bad karma, it's hard to see the end. We think that this test we're struggling with, we can't even imagine it being over, and we think we're always going to be like this. But remember one thing. Every time we sincerely call on God to help us, every time we try to please the Guru, every time we meditate and practice the teachings, each and every time we're moving closer to the end of that tunnel of karma, closer to emerging in that love, that light of God. I love the little story Muktima used to tell, where once she was with Master, and they were in the Encinitas Hermitage in the drawing room, and he was getting ready to go out, and she said, you could almost hear and feel God talking to him. That presence of God was just so strong, and she had this thought, just imagine, here I am in the presence of a God-realized Master. And Guruji turned his head toward her a little bit. He caught her thought, and she knew it. And then he saw a very tiny white thread on the carpet, almost imperceptible, and he pointed it out to her, and very gently, very kindly, he said, pick that up, and she did. And what I get out of this story, to reach Master's consciousness, to experience his divine consciousness, we make the effort in the little ways. You see, each little effort to practice the presence of God, to think of God, each little effort to meditate sincerely, each effort on the spiritual path is important. Each effort counts because it is precisely those little acts and determinations that are the very steps that lift us into the divine presence. Our gurus said, saints and yogis never give up. No matter what our difficulties may be, if we do not give up, we are struggling against the stream. And to struggle is to win the favor of God. Now, a basic rule about introspection. It has to be a positive experience. And I don't think I can stress this enough, because we ministers see this where you meet some devotees and they're the sweetest, kindest, most loving people, but when they start to introspect to themselves, they become mean, sometimes vicious. So I want you to take this very seriously now, what I have to say here. There is nothing spiritual about beating yourself up. There is nothing spiritual about ripping yourself to pieces. If we are just these bodies and minds with all the limitations, then introspection is nothing to look forward to. But we begin introspection with the realization we are God's children and God loves us. And all our flaws are just temporary blemishes covering the beauty of the soul. Because that's the truth. Dayamata once said, when I tended to judge myself too harshly and consequently to suffer a great deal because I felt I was not living up to Gurudev's expectations 100%, he again gave me the right perspective. What is past is past. Correct yourself and forget the past. Don't give any more thought to it. When I was a young boy, I saw this science fiction movie. And at the end of the movie, they finally show you the monsters they've kind of been referring to in a roundabout way. And at the end, you see the monsters are these giant ants. And maybe a few of you from my generation, about 300 years ago, remember that. I think the name of the movie was Them. And if you take any insect and you look at it under magnification, it looks horrible, with the bulging eyes and the protruding jaws and the antennas. But really, all it is, it's a little bug that's been greatly magnified. Sometimes, under the magnifying glass of discouragement, we look at our flaws and we think we have these terrible monsters. It's not as bad as you think. It's not that bad. For one thing, all of us have things to work on. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. We'd all be having a grand time on Hiranyaloka. And most importantly, any flaws you have, they are not part of you. They are not part of you. One of my favorite all-time quotations from Guruji. This is from the Gita commentary. The aspiring yogi should always bear in mind when he feels angry, that is not me. When his self-possession is being overpowered by lust or greed, he should say to himself, that is not me. When hatred tries to obscure his real nature with a mask of ugly emotion, he should forcefully disassociate himself from it. That is not me. And whenever that devotee has been used or abused by others, and yet he feels within a stirring of the Holy Spirit of forgiveness and love, he can then affirm with conviction, that is me. That is my real nature. The key point, when we're tested, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as the restless devotee who has no chance to ever succeed on the spiritual path? Or do you see yourself as that resolute devotee who loves God so sincerely, who is trying so sincerely that you will never give up? Never give up your search for God, no matter what may come. Always seeking to be grounded in a greater, deeper reality. Love of God, joy of God, peace of God. How do you see yourself? Do you think you are going to find God in this life? Years ago, this question came up for me in a big way. I was a young monk, and I passed by some devotees in the ashram, and I overheard the conversation a little bit, and one of the monks was telling somebody else, well, if we try real hard, in the next life it should be easier. And I didn't hear the whole conversation. I probably heard it out of context, but the impression I had was he was saying, I can't find God in this life. And he was one I looked up to. I was devastated. I was disturbed. And so for months, this question haunted me. Is it really possible to find God in this life? Or is this just something for the Rajasi Janakanandas and the Jnanamadas and the Dayamadas? Is it really possible? I want to know, Master. So one day, some months later, I was told that Dayamata would be meeting with us that evening, a group of us monks, for satsang. And so I thought to myself, here's my chance. I'm going to ask her the question. I'm going to get the truth from her. I remember that evening there were about 10 of us with her, and I was by far the youngest. And one of the other monks asked her a question, and she gave this beautiful reply, but it was hard for me to pay attention because this question was burning in me. And I felt this conflict because I thought, I'm the youngest one here. It's not proper for me to speak up with my seniors all around me. I'm not going to be able to ask my question. And I was really feeling in conflict. And as soon as she finished her reply to that monk, she turned and looked right at me and she said, George, at the time I was Brahmachari George, she said, George, what is your question? And before I knew it, the words just came tumbling out. And I told her, Ma, Sometimes I think some of the devotees here don't really believe that they can find God in this life. So my question is this: even if one is struggling with restlessness, even if one is struggling with test of the body and all these different things that we have to confront, is it still possible to know God in this life? And without hesitation, she looked directly into my eyes and she said, absolutely, you can know God in this life. And that, of course, wasn't just for me, it's for all of us. And she said, to entertain any limiting thoughts is to indulge in negative thinking. She stressed, we have to be very faithful in sadhana, meditating faithfully every day. And when we sit to meditate, really making that effort to control the mind, not being absent-minded, doing our best. She told the story about Guruji's aunt, who for 40 years she practiced japa yoga on her prayer beads, but she felt no peace. And when she came to Master, he told her, the reason you feel no peace is because all those 40 years when you've been doing your japa yoga, your mind has been on your household duties, your family, everything but God. That is why you have no peace. So making that effort to control the mind when we meditate, to really sincerely make that effort, that's vital. Guruji used to tell this story about this young, very successful businessman in India, and he was traveling a lot for his business from India to London, all the time thinking how he could cut the cost to maximize the profits. And so one day a friend comes to him, and he tells him that his friend just met this saint on the river Ganges who can teach levitation. And immediately this businessman, his mind starts working on this. And he thinks, well, if I can levitate from Bombay to London, I can save a bundle here. And so he asks the saint to teach him, and the saint says, that's easy, I can teach you levitation. All you have to do is every day for a month spend an hour in meditation. And when you're sitting in meditation, you chant and concentrate on the holy word of the cosmic vibration Om. And if you can do that without interruption and without distraction, at the end of a month, you'll be racing through the air over land or sea. And so the businessman's thinking, well, that's easy. I can do that. And as he's about to leave, the saint says, oh, just one more thing. When you sit to chant and concentrate on Om, it's very, very, very important. You must never think of a monkey. And the businessman thinks to himself, well, that's silly. I haven't thought of a monkey in 20 years. And he tells the saint, I never think of monkeys. You didn't even have to tell me that. And the saint says, that's wonderful. So this fellow comes home, and as soon as he sits on his meditation seat, the first thought is, I must not think of a monkey. After 2 minutes, he's had several times that thought, I must not think of a monkey. After 10 minutes, he's thought of hundreds and hundreds of monkeys. Monkeys in Africa and India, the South Pacific. And every day when he sits to meditate, it's the same thing. As soon as he touches that meditation seat, thousands of monkeys jump up and they're running around his consciousness. And he's furious with himself, but he doesn't know what to do. And at the end of the month, he's totally frustrated. And he returns to the saint, and he tells him, Master, you can take back that stupid lesson on levitation. You haven't taught me anything. You've given me monkey consciousness. And then the saint tells him, but very lovingly, he says, I only wanted you to see what a slave you are to that mind of yours. Before you can do anything, you have to take control of that mind. You have to learn concentration. And then he tells him, and why go after the levitation when you can use your concentration-trained mind to seek the greatest treasure, that love, that joy of God? So, training the mind when we sit to meditate. And sure, all of us will have the challenges where we're aware the mind's roaming. As soon as you're aware of that, don't get upset, don't get frustrated, but pull in, rein in your attention, put it back on your meditation. Practice the Hong Sa technique of concentration. Your mind wanders, pull it back. Your mind wanders 1,000 times, pull it back 1,001 times. And gradually, that mind, it begins to respond. And don't just count the hours spent in meditation, because then it becomes mechanical. You see, I remember reading one article. This fellow told this reporter, I've logged in 25,000 hours in meditation. Well, God is not an accountant, you know. And you can log in 1,000,000 hours of meditation, but if your attitude isn't right, or if your mind's roaming all over creation, God will not respond to that. But when we sit to meditate with deep sincerity, when we sit to meditate forgetting time with that deep yearning to love Him and to experience His love, that love is the divine magnet that God cannot resist. Then He must come, Guruji says. So Ma, she stressed controlling the mind in meditation, and she also said, God realization, it's not just what comes in the meditation. When we're feeling greater peace in our daily activities, when we're able to look at others with greater understanding and kindness, when we're able to live a life more in tune with God's laws, these are all signs, sure signs, that we are growing in God realization too. So, we can know God in this life, each and every one of us here. That's the truth. But the most beautiful thing, though I've heard this from Dayama directly, and that experience I will never forget as long as I live, but even more powerful than that, if each day you sincerely practice the teachings and faithfully meditate, striving for a depth, you will realize for yourself that you can know God in this life. He will begin to speak to you through those intuitive convictions. You will know not with your mind, but with your heart, with your intuition, with every fiber and cell of your being. Because spiritual effort results in greater spiritual enthusiasm. You meditate faithfully, and you will know God is attainable. And sure, we have dry spells from time to time, and sometimes they can go on a while. Even saints have dry spells, so we certainly don't get off scot-free. I like the example of the camel. You know why? The camel has his drink of water. Then he can go a long time in the desert where it's dry without any water, because the waters he's had, his body conserves so well. When we have an experience of God, you have to learn to get the most of it. Write it down. Keep a record of it and feed upon that experience. Remember it again and again in your heart with thanksgiving. Divine Mother, thank you. Thank you. Thank God. Thank Guru for giving you that experience. And if you're grateful, and if you keep reliving that spiritual experience, what will happen, that peace, that spiritual power, that inspiration from that experience, it continues, you see. It continues. The key to seeing ourselves in a positive light is that continuity in making spiritual effort. When we're faithful, we begin to experience that unconditional love of God. It's always there, but by making the right effort, we're better able to receive it. And what happens, that experience of feeling and knowing that you are loved by God, that becomes your anchor. That becomes your bedrock. In the life of every devotee, there's two great absolutes. First, we are the ever blissful, perfect soul. And no matter what we go through, nothing will ever change that. And the second absolute, God and Guru love us, and that love is unconditional. And no matter what test comes our way, no matter how many bad habits, how many mistakes we make, that love, it's there. It never fails. We can ignore it. We can turn away from it and steep ourselves in delusion, and we suffer. You put your finger in the fire, it burns. But the moment we turn to God, and the moment we turn to Guru as God's channel, those blessings are there, divinely empowering us to change, divinely empowering us in our search to know God. There's a beautiful story in the Bible, Jesus and the woman of Samaria, where Jesus and his disciples, they came to the well. And then Jesus sent the disciples into town to gather some food. And so he's sitting there all by himself, and this woman comes up to draw water, and he asks her for a drink of water. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, ask drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. And in his commentary on this verse, our guru explains, this is not a chance encounter. He calls it a divinely devised guru-disciple reunion. The woman, she's a disciple of Jesus's from a previous lifetime, a fallen disciple. And now he's come to redeem her. Master says, it is for the sake of the unredeemed that the guru must come back to earth. The God-ordained Savior continues to help his disciples when their own efforts permit him to do so until all are finally liberated. No matter what their degree of advancement, disciples once accepted by a true guru hold a secure place in that relationship as they gradually progress and oftentimes falter incarnation after incarnation. And then what happens? The woman, she says to Jesus, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? And Jesus tells her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water I shall give shall never thirst. But the water I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And our guru explains the well of the water. This is material things. You can have all kinds of material things, but no matter how much you have, you always want more. You can have the new house and the new car and the new airplane and the new rocket ship, but there's always new something else you want. But the living water that the guru offers the disciple, that's the joy of God. Our guru says Jesus spoke of the inner experience, the uncovering with the help of one's guru of the wellspring of divinity within the soul. Oblivious of the all-sustaining, all-desire-quenching divine life and bliss within his soul, the material man will die unfulfilled. But whosoever drinks of the fountain of eternal bliss in God will find the thirst of every desire of all his incarnations quenched forever. And it is through the blessings and guidance and teachings of the guru that we find that eternal fulfillment. Now, there's another part to this whole story of the woman of Samaria that's very, very important. Because after all this, the woman, she says, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not. And then Jesus tells her, Go call thy husband and come hither. And she says, I have no husband. And Jesus says, Thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. And then the woman said, Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet. You see, when Jesus asked her to call her husband, it was a test. It was a trick question. And when she said she had no husband, she passed the test because she had had many lovers, 5 of them. She had been living a promiscuous life. And Jesus wanted to see if she would be truthful. And she didn't lie. She didn't try to defend or justify. You know, it would have been so easy. She could have said, Jesus, you just don't understand. The men of this town, they just don't know the meaning of the word commitment. She could have spent 5 hours telling Jesus why she had to do what she had to do. But she didn't. All she said was, "Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet." And because of that openness, because of her receptivity, she received that all-transforming, healing blessing from her guru. And there's a very good lesson there for us. No matter what the mistake, no matter what bad habit overpowers you, we should never be afraid to go before the guru and open our hearts. Lord, I'm sorry. I will try to do better. Help me. If we go to the guru with that open heart, we receive that blessing that will never fail us. Because stronger than any test, stronger than any delusion is the love that the disciple receives from the guru. You know, you think of Judas. Jesus is an avatar. When Judas came to Jesus, Jesus surely saw the whole thing, that disciple's tendencies. Why did Jesus accept him? It would have been so easy for Jesus to say, "No, that one will most likely betray me. He's dangerous. I will not let him into my inner circle." Why did Jesus ever accept Judas as one of the 12 disciples? Well, in his commentary on this story, The Woman of Samaria, our guru explains the reason Jesus accepted Judas, because Judas was his disciple from the past. And the guru always accepts the disciple. Always. Here's what our guru says. When a guru sees the soul of a disciple fallen in ignorance, his God-given duty and heartfelt concern leave no choice but to help. Every soul can be rescued, no matter how entangled in error, if the mind makes a genuine commitment to cooperate spiritually. The guru provides repeated opportunities for the disciple to make this breakthrough from ignorance. Though one's sins be as deep as the ocean, still he can be saved if he is sincere and loyal to his master, linking himself with the channel that draws him to God. So, we've been talking tonight about introspection. And the first part of introspection, it's a process of discovery. Taking a good, honest look at ourselves and seeing how that daily battle is going between the good and bad habits. And then the next step, we work the teachings, choosing specific actions from all the wonderful spiritual recipes that our guru gives to weaken the bad habits and to strengthen and form the good habits that we want in our lives. But then, the final part of introspection, and this is so very important, renewal. Renewal. We begin and end introspection by affirming we are the ever-perfect, blissful child of God. And as such, we cannot help but succeed in our efforts to know God if we don't give up. Our guru has promised this. And no matter what the struggles, no matter what the test, how many bad habits are pounding at the door, always remembering we are loved unconditionally by God and Guru. That is our bedrock. That is our anchor. Our Guru loves us. And to practice the teachings with sincerity and devotion, and to meditate faithfully each day to the best of our ability with sincerity and devotion, is to tune in with those all-powerful blessings of the Guru. And those blessings will conquer any delusion we will ever have to face. So again, let us listen to our Guru's words. Every soul can be rescued, no matter how entangled in error, if the mind makes a genuine commitment to cooperate spiritually. The Guru provides repeated opportunities for the disciple to make this breakthrough from ignorance. Though one's sins be as deep as the ocean, still he can be saved if he is sincere and loyal to his master, linking himself with the channel that draws him to God. And to close tonight's class, let us just take a moment to close our eyes, to visualize the Guru at the spiritual eye, and feel that in the divine light of his love and his transforming blessings, your bad habits are weakening and melting away, and your spiritual habits are becoming stronger. And let us pray. Beloved Guru, permeate us with thy peace. Permeate us with thy divine light. Permeate us with thy spiritual power. Help us to realize that thou art ever with us, guiding and blessing our lives. Om. Om. Shanti. Amen. May God and Gurus bless us all.